Hey guys, thanks for joining us here. Salty Ginger Talk. If you're a returning listener, it is great to have you back. If you're new to the channel, really glad you joined us. Hope you like what you hear. So our podcast is for people who either want to learn something new or make themselves a little bit better every day. And so we're going to talk about a topic today that's very popular but controversial in today's world, and that is Elon Musk spearheading the Department of Government Efficiency, better known colloquially as DOGE. And we're going to explain to you why we're for it. There's clearly some challenges or issues that need to be watched or monitored closely. It is not, in our mind, it's not definitive one way or the other if this is something that should be happening or should not be happening. But from our perspective, the juice is worth the squeeze. It is worth absorbing the risks and monitoring the risks that come with this approach. And we're going to explain why. We'll talk a little bit about the budget and the sections of the budget and what DOGE is working on. So that's the genesis for today's episode. So first, let's just talk about government in general. The United States government is well known for bureaucracy and inefficiency, and you could probably say the same for almost any government. There's some reasons for that. With public funds being the only revenue. And that's the important thing to remember, is that government doesn't create a thing. The only way government can raise funds is to take them from the private sector via taxes or fees. There is no way for governments to just manufacture money. And even though we print money at the United States government, we have to pay that money back. And we'll see when we look at the budget, that's a pretty significant source of cost because we've borrowed so much money. The national debt is north of $30 trillion at this point. And so government's inefficient. It is an inefficient way to deliver goods and services to people. And it's one of the reasons we have never been proponents of larger government. We are ultra-libertarian and think that you should be able to keep as much of your money as possible, and that government should provide as few services as possible to the citizens, and you should be able to do what you want. We only really need a couple laws, enforce private contracts, make sure that you and your things are safe, and defend our borders. And after that, government really does not have a responsibility to people. It is people's responsibility to organize locally and take care of many of the issues that we turn to government for. So as time has passed, too many people have looked at government as the cure-all. It's the answer for any issue, the big issue, the small issue. There should be a law against that. How many times have we heard that said? That creates more bureaucracy, it creates more red tape, and it creates massive amounts of room for bloat and corruption, neither of which are good. And so that's why we're so anti-growth of government and anti-government in general. The government should be small. If you read our Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, the tenets under which our country were founded was that men and women, when I use men, I'm talking about mankind, all genders, everybody, every race, every creed, every sexual orientation, every religion, everybody is granted inalienable rights by their creator. So that means simply by being born, you have these rights. Government does not bestow these rights on you. In fact, it's government's job to ensure that those rights are not encumbered in any way. And so, or abridged. I think it's abridged is the word they use a lot in the Constitution. But it's not government's job to give you these rights. They don't grant you these rights. It's their job. It's the government's job to protect those rights. Those rights are sacrosanct. So we've got this big bloated government, and it's not hard to figure out how it happened, right? When in around 1800, the United States population was somewhere around 5 million people. So fast forward 225 years, and the population is now north of 330 million people in the country. Started off as 13 states. It's now 50. Started off simply on the East Coast. It has spread all the way across the country, all the way out to Hawaii and up to Alaska. There's territories, Puerto Rico, Guam are American territories. So it's a far-reaching country now. So it's not hard to figure out how it happened, but we have continued to take the same approach in managing how we fund this behemoth that we have become. And the problem is when you keep doing the same thing, you're going to get the same results. So as we add more layers of bureaucracy, as we add more restrictions, as we add more government oversight, it creates more and more bloat, more and more cost, and it becomes more expensive for us to run our country. And there's no good reason for that because we've relied on the government for things we should not rely the government on. So the only way to fix this, we think, is to essentially blow it up. We need radical change. Little tweaks are not going to get done what we need to get done. And we can't think of a better person to take that challenge on than someone like Elon Musk. So Elon Musk is dispassionate about money. Is he the richest guy in the world? Yes, he is. That is a byproduct of the things he has chosen to pursue. He has not pursued them for the sake of becoming the richest person in the world. If you look at the companies he has founded and where he has spent his time the last 20 to 25 years, those are companies that are looking to further the benefits of mankind. Tesla, so green energy, green cars, reducing carbon emissions into the environment. SpaceX, to explore intergalactic travel so that we can find additional planets to inhabit in case at some point, well, I shouldn't say in case, at some point the Earth will become uninhabitable. And he's looking at it saying we've got to get ahead of that. Starlink, so everybody has communication around the world. You think about all the people that have been in natural disasters, floods, hurricanes, fires, and Elon Musk's company Starlink has literally delivered Starlink, which allows you Wi-Fi connection at no charge. He's done that at no charge. So he's a great engineer. He's a great problem solver. He's operated at huge scale, and we can't think of a better person to take that on. So we're very supportive of him spearheading that group. Now, with that said, there's a couple of things that need to be discussed, and they're real. One, Elon Musk company have billions and billions of dollars of contracts with the U.S. government. So we need to ensure that someone is watching this, or some group, some agency, whether it's Department of Justice, whether it's Department of Energy, I don't know who it is, but somebody needs to watch this to make sure that he's not making decisions or I guess it's a better way to say recommending decisions, because Elon Musk has no power or no authority. He hasn't been elected to office. He hasn't been appointed to a cabinet position. He is an advisor to the president. Now, does he carry an inordinate amount of power as an advisor? You're goddamn right he does, and we are glad that he does. We can't think of better people to listen to than a serial entrepreneur who has shown such success on such big and impactful projects like Elon Musk. So we'd much rather have him make suggestions about what is right or wrong with the federal government than a senator, than a bureaucrat, than somebody without the experience that he has. So we're good with that part of it. But we need to make sure that there is no actual conflict of interest. So we totally get that, totally acknowledge it, totally support it, and we're 100% behind making sure that that doesn't happen. Second, the people that are accountable for the actions of DOGE are the elected officials, starting with President Trump. So he is choosing to listen to these guys. He is choosing to give them a wide berth in terms of what they look at, what they recommend, what they do, and he's responsible for those actions. So zero issues with that either. We elected him as president. He's responsible for their actions. So with that said, so long as those two things are going on, we're good with him getting in there and kind of rooting around and looking at how things are working. So knowing that they're there to, Department of Government efficiency, it's to squeeze costs and redundancies out of the government. So if we flip over to the last final budget that we have, which is the year 2023, we can go over some numbers to show just how much we need to do something. So first, in 2023, the federal government collected $4.5 trillion in revenue, but it spent $6.2 trillion in cost. So that led to a $1.7 trillion deficit. So that adds to the national debt, which is now up to $33 trillion at the end of fiscal year 2023. That is just not sustainable. And you'll see in the chart that we throw up here, the total revenue at 4.47 trillion and the total spending, a significant chunk of the spending is actually net interest on that debt. So we are paying a high premium for borrowing against the future in order to fund activities now. And we would argue that a lot of those activities don't need to take place. A lot of those activities need to be stopped. And that's what we're hopeful can come from the Department of Government Efficiency looking at these things. Now, with that said, when you bucket the other items in the federal budget, there's really only a couple of places that make sense where there's enough spending, aggregate spending, to cut trillions of dollars out of the budget. So Social Security is one. Somehow we need to rework that program. We actually don't think DOGE will do that. We need to rework that program somehow, but it's not sustainable the way that it is now because Social Security was built on a model where one generation would always be bigger than the next. So as a generation retired, there was more people still working to keep funding Social Security until people died and were no longer on Social Security. So two issues have impacted that negatively. One, that's not been the trajectory of generations. So the baby boomers were a big generation. The generation that I'm part of, Generation X, followed them, and they were much smaller than baby boomers. And so millennial generation was big, but there is not a just simply increasing population base by which to fund Social Security. The flip side of that is people are living much longer now than they were when Social Security was first designed, so, like over a decade longer. And so the funding that's required to pay out to people while they're still on Social Security has increased because people are living longer. So the combination of those two things makes Social Security unsustainable. Next, and this is a big one, national defense, right? That is a big chunk of our budget. And we will guarantee you that DOGE is going to find inefficiency at minimum, fraud and corruption at maximum. We'd be shocked if they don't find fraud and corruption within that system. There have been too many big companies operating within that complex for too long. If you think back to President Eisenhower's farewell address to the country, he warned us of this in the 50s, and he called it the industrial military complex, whereby there's a whole industry that's generated simply to keep us in war because they profit off of war. And he was 100% correct. We continue to feed that industrial military complex. That is rife for the picking from our perspective, and we're very interested to see what DOGE uncovers there. The second part is the healthcare, both Medicare and Medicaid, that's paid out to cover Medicare covers elderly folks, and Medicaid covers low-income folks who don't have health insurance. And so the government picks up that tab. And those are great programs. We don't want those programs to go away at all. With that said, we are certain, just like we talked about with the military, that they will find those programs have significant amounts of fraud, significant amounts of bloat, significant amounts of redundancy that can be taken care of through just making some decisions and saying, we're not doing that anymore. That department is not necessary. It's not going to exist. We found this doctor, this hospital, this clinic that billed 10 times more than anybody for this particular procedure. There's fraud going there. We're going to go investigate it, and we're going to prosecute the people that did it, and we're going to collect that money back if it's still available. So we think those are the three big buckets. Social Security, but that's really not a cut. We have to rework that program somehow. And we're not making any suggestions on how. We just know it's broken. We just know it needs to be dealt with, and it needs to be dealt with sooner than later because it's not sustainable the way that it's set up now. And then the two where the biggest opportunities are defense and Medicare and Medicaid. And we will be shocked if DOGE doesn't provide some benefits there. We're going to talk in a little bit about why we think that's true. Then we've got assistance to individuals. That's things like food stamps or SBA loans or those kind of things. Net interest on the debt, transfers to states, and those are federally funded programs like WIC, For example, WIC gets funded by the federal government, but administered at the state level. Food stamps get funded by the federal government, but administered at the state level. So those programs, there's probably opportunities there, but that's really not where, in our opinion at least, we'll be surprised if there's a whole bunch of things to cut or streamline in that bucket. We think the two big buckets by far, Medicare, Medicaid, and defense, for sure. So, and then there's a small group of other. But you'll see it in the chart that we put up here. And I think it's a good website if you want to familiarize yourself with how the federal budget works. So, with all that said, let's just flip back over to Doge and explain why we think it's a good idea and why we have confidence that they're going to be able to deliver some of the things that they're talking about delivering. Number one is just to provide transparency in where and how taxpayer dollars are being spent. So you're seeing that already. And if you look at what they're doing, there's a very methodical approach that they're taking. Start with small items, figure out the process, figure out what you need to do to uncover the opportunities. And as soon as you've perfected that process, turn to the bigger stuff. And you've seen them talk about like this USAID, this nebulous program that's been around for decades, that it seems very hard to trace the money, and they're exposing where a lot of that money is going. You've heard about, it sounds good. They make good sound bites, but 50 million or billion on condoms or this or that. Okay, yeah, maybe that's true. Maybe it's not true. But those are actually drops in the bucket compared to defense spending and Medicare, Medicaid, at least in our opinion. But just knowing where that is collectively, if you start knocking out those programs, it's still real money. Let's say that you could cut $500 billion out of that bucket just by creating efficiencies or identifying, hey, this program might have made sense at one point. It doesn't make sense anymore, so we're going to stop doing it. So even if we decide to keep doing it, even if we decide to keep spending the money, we should know. And that transparency is terribly important. And if your job is to get reelected, like an elected official, or your job is dependent on the U.S. government, you're not in any position, you're not incentivized at all to raise your hand and go, wait, this doesn't make sense. We should cut this stuff, because you might be cutting your job. So there's zero reason for someone that works in the federal government to look for efficiencies and surface those ideas to their superiors. But if you bring in a disinterested third party that's got experience in performing this process in private businesses, we think that's a great, great opportunity. And so we're very excited about it. That leads us to point number 2. We think from those analysis, they'll be able to identify and recommend where we can eliminate or streamline redundancies in staffing and the organization of the government. When you think about it, so like we run grocery stores, and so we have multiple government agencies that we are responsible to. The fire department, the health department, the building department, et cetera, et cetera. And in our case, that probably makes sense, right? We want the public to be healthy. We want the public to be safe. We have no problem with health inspectors being in our stores. We have no problem with fire inspectors making sure our stores are safe. In that particular instance, it's probably a good thing. But we're certain there's opportunities out there to streamline some of the oversight and get rid of some of the bloat that exists in some of these agencies. Number 3, and this is a big one, identify and eliminate fraud. So there is fraud rampant in government programs. And you think about how many times you've seen a county treasurer or a town treasurer or someone who has created a fictitious business and then written checks to that business out of the government coffers, and they're pocketing the money. So we're certain that's going on in Medicare and Medicaid. We're certain that's going on in the defense budget. And we're super hopeful that the DOGE group will be able to find and eliminate those things. The reason we're confident about that is because this is a young, very technologically savvy group of people who understand how to mine and organize data and use systems to mine that data for trends to identify these opportunities. So I don't know if a lot of people know, but many of the computer systems that the government operates on are super antiquated. Many of them run on a language called COBOL, C-O-B-O-L, and they don't even teach. They stopped teaching that computer programming in the 80s in computer curriculum, computer software curriculum in colleges. Like, there's nobody out there that knows how to fix these systems. They're so inefficient in comparison to the other systems that exist today This group will be able to look and say, hey, we can use AI, for example. We can use this particular software, for example. We can use this particular program to mine this data and identify trends. So in hours, they'll be able to do things that used to take people years to do in terms of identifying and looking for opportunities. And that will allow them to make recommendations on upgrading hardware, on upgrading software, on upgrading operating systems. And so we are very excited and very optimistic that the DOGE group will be able to deliver on a good part of what they are trying to deliver on. So for all of those reasons, we are supportive of the DOGE effort. We recognize completely that we need to manage the conflict of interests. We need to make sure that the legality of what they're doing, we shouldn't have, a 25-year-old we shouldn't have anyone. Forget the age. I don't know why I said age, because it doesn't matter at all. But someone that's not duly sworn to the U.S. government should not have access to data that only government employees should have access to. So totally got it. Totally got it. You can truncate social security numbers. You can truncate a lot of things. Those things are less important until we uncover fraud and we need to know who to chase. And at that point, you turn it over to the Department of Justice. The FBI can take it on. Federal prosecutors can take it on. Whoever. But there are ways to get this done that still preserve people's rights. Because remember, we're a libertarian. We are huge on individual rights. We are huge on individual autonomy. So we couldn't be more supportive of individual autonomy. We don't think those are mutually exclusive. You don't have to sacrifice your individual autonomy in order for the group that's running DOGE to do the work that we're asking them to do, or that President Trump is asking them to do. And then we're going to hold President Trump accountable. And I think this is brilliant. I think he's going to get a huge win out of this. Didn't vote for Trump, still have never voted for Trump. But I support a lot of the things that he's doing right now, because I look at the system and say it's broken and we have to take very aggressive corrective action to try to fix it. And so I'm supportive of what he's doing, especially after watching the Biden administration essentially spend 4 years gnashing their teeth and twiddling their thumbs. They did not accomplish a lot. They did not take a lot of big steps. They focused on the wrong things, in our opinion. And so we're very supportive of this new administration coming in and taking their shots on the things they're taking their shots on. And if it doesn't work, that's going to be their political neck. That's it. They're accountable for it. They should be accountable for it. We 100% support holding them accountable for it. We think in the long run, it'll be a big win for them. But we'll see how it plays out. So that's the episode for today, guys. Hope you found that interesting. We'd love to hear your thoughts on what's going on. How do you feel about Elon Musk and this group of people operating on the government without being a part of the government? I mean, the government's always had advisors, but this setup, we can't think of anything anywhere in history that looks anything like this. And so it is brand new. And we'd love to hear your take on it. Leave us a comment or leave your thoughts in the comments so all the other listeners can see what you think about it as well. So don't forget, James puts it up over here every day. We've got a website, saltygingertalk.com. We've got all of our podcast episodes available on that website. We've got links to all of our social media accounts available on that website. And then we publish a newsletter every weekday that you can subscribe to on our website. We do 3 essentially current events, stories. We give a tip of the day. We give a quote of the day. We're a bit snarky and sarcastic. And we think it's a fun, quick 5-minute read to stay in the know to start your day off. So if you're interested, you can subscribe to our newsletter on our website as well. So really appreciate you checking out the channel. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel on whatever platform you consume it on. It's super helpful for us so we can get our videos out and our episodes out in front of more people. So really appreciate you checking out the episode today, guys. Hope everyone has a great week, and we will see you next time.